Alrighty, hello every folks, and good morning. Welcome to another tier list here. This is going to be by far the most requested one that I've never actually gotten around to. Simply put, because I was originally going to do it about 3 or 4 years ago, and then the DLC came out and things got exponentially more complicated. So that being said, I'm going to do my best here. Bear in mind that even with all of the classes here, even despite having played through this thing multiple times, there's just a bunch of random stuff that I simply do not have locked in my brain yet, so yeah, we're gonna have the wiki up for help on this one, because there are so many classes, so many skills, and so many oddly specific things, and I figured the best way to handle this is we put them up, I put out my general opinion, and then kind of adjust based off of what's on the wiki. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started, and for those unfamiliar, by the way, with Felseal, if you've never played this thing, if you liked FFT, you're gonna like Felseal, more or less. Think like, take FFT, and expand the team building options out the wazoo. Give yourself additional options for customizing how enemy teams spawn, how their AI functions, how the difficulty in general is put together. Like, it's one of the most customizable FFT style experiences you'll ever see, with insane amounts of customization in every possible angle. This is an indie darling that's well beloved for good reason. It's a very small team, so you'll notice immediately that there's some budget stuff there, but don't let that stop you. Do not be one of those people that skips this game based off of initial views of the visuals. It's kind of like Ogre Battle 64 in that way, because there's actually a lot more going on there visually than it seems. It just doesn't screenshot particularly well. Anyway, let's go ahead and get started. So the classes are going to be a mix of stuff that's familiar and kind of new mixes on old familiar stuff here. So starting with the basic beginner class, we have the Mercenary. Now, initial opinion, I'm going to put them up to A. We're talking about a unit that's got the monkey grip ability, more or less, being able to equip heavy weapons in one hand, though that being said, there's kind of a limited quantity of weapons that you'd really want to use this for. This is especially useful for them with two-handed hammers, which they can essentially dual wield. Those hammers provide a health bonus, which means that their already meaty health bar can get even more meaty. They come with a lot of standard abilities that you'll typically find useful throughout the entire game here. So going down their list, we've got Forceful Strike, which is going to push a target back. Now the thing is, the pushback damage is insanely high in this game, to the point that even when you're on New Game Plus, this oftentimes can end up outscaling a lot of the direct damage that you would normally do. So Forceful Strike is incredibly strong for a number of reasons. Bear in mind that you don't really have pit drop kills in this one outside of water. So you have drown kills, but you don't have pit drop kills. Instead, you have additional damage when a target is unable to move. From there, we have Field Aid, which gives you a small heal, as well as getting rid of Poison, Bleed, Mute, Cripple, and Sleep. All of those are very useful. Power Strike, which puts attack down, as well as Mind Strike, which puts mine down. Those two are ones that I haven't really seen a crazy amount of effect from personally, though they are useful for when you're trying to stack down one particular guy. Counter Attack, which counters one regular attack with another regular attack. Health Expert, which increases maximum health by 25%. Precise Strike, which causes the next attack to hit with 100% accuracy, which is very useful in, hell, especially in New Game Plus there, because there's going to be a lot of targets that are very evasive. Flash Strike, which bypasses counter abilities. This is one of the very few abilities that can actually hit somebody with physical evade and stuff like that. Sturdy Grip, which is basically monkey grip. And then Stunning Strike, which causes a delay by 60% for the unit's next turn. So overall, I would say they're a fantastic value. They've got skills that are useful all game. They're basically what would happen if we had the mentality of the FFTA starting unit as an improved version of the Squire from FFT, taken to the sort of Tactics Ogre extreme of having skills that are good enough to last into post-game. So very solid stuff there. And usually, in most games, I don't cover growths. They are pretty noticeable in this one, so we will cover those as well. So for mastering this class, your bonuses go towards health and defense, as you'd expect. They're essentially a high-health, high-precision tank, and overall, very solid unit. They're great at offense, great at defense, nothing really too notable aside from that, just great general purpose, pretty much the epitome of A tier. Okay, next up we are going to have the Scoundrel. Now, my initial opinion before even pulling up the list is that they're a solid maybe. I feel like putting them into C if I'm remembering them correctly. Their blinding attack, I recall being pretty useful. I recall their everything else about them being a little difficult to put together, but let's go ahead and put them in here. I will note, though, that they are somebody that makes use of one of what I consider to be the coolest mechanics in this game, which is the fact that you can steal from enemy item stocks. So if you haven't played Felsteel, basically, each team has item stocks rather than going and buying items at the shop. So, like, as you go through the game, you upgrade your item stocks, and in this case, you can essentially go and steal items from the enemy team to resupply yourself, which is pretty darn cool. Anyway, going down the list here, we've got Steel GP. I just noticed, did we actually... I think, yeah, we did cover the passives last time. Okay, so we've got Steel GP. It's a physical attack that causes it causes you to steal the amount of health as the damage that you do. I usually stop caring about GP once you start getting away missions. You've got Dirty Hit. This is the one that I remember being really good with an auto crossbow. So this deals physical damage and has a 62% chance of inflicting blind, counts as a regular attack, and will use the equipped weapons element and debuffs. So with something like a auto crossbow, this means that you can basically shotgun fire blindness, which is really strong. Steal item does 0.75 damage to the target, and will attempt to steal a consumable item from them. So very useful in cases where, like, you're trying to shut down their revives and things like that. Problem is, it's pretty rare that you'll actually get the revive items, but if you run into an item specialist team, this basically hard counters them pretty easily. You've got Fleet of Foot, which is going to be their passive here, or their counter, sorry. So that's going, or no, that's not their counter. Hold on, let me see here. No, this is the action version. There's actually a counter version of this somewhere else, too. So, grants Fleet of Foot, removes Root, and allows the character to move +1. So it's basically move +1, and you get rid of Root, get general purpose move. Steal buffs, which will do exactly what it says. It steals all buffs from the target. Very useful versus bosses. I personally found it very situational, so didn't really end up using it that often, but if you're in the right circumstances, it can work really well. That one definitely does not scale up terribly well to New Game Plus for some reason. I think it's mostly because there's just more debuffs than buffs lying around at that point. But potentially very, very strong at countering Beastmasters, but we'll get to those later. Arterial Cut does 0.85 physical to the target and has a 62% chance of inflicting bleed, counts as regular attack, and will use equipped weapons everything. So again, very useful with your shotgun crossbow. Steal Components attempts to steal a component from the target for crafting purposes. Steal counters any offensive action on the character by an adjacent unit by attempting to steal a component. Enemies will steal an item instead. So basically, this is one of the few cases of the enemy units actually having a better version of the skill that you have. So you'll steal crafting components, they will steal your items. So very scary on enemy teams, not so great on yourself, so I would not really bother using this counter ability unless you have nothing better in the early game. Attack Expert, this one's very good, actually. This probably is enough to at least bump them up to a B. So increases attack value by 24 plus 1 times your level. So basically, this is useful for just any direct attack specialist, and again, very good in combination with their other abilities that combine with the crossbow. You'll notice that I mentioned the auto crossbow a lot because there's a lot of weapons that have kind of multi-target type of shenanigans attached to them. So a lot of skills will just suddenly drastically increase in value in some specific situation like that. And then you've got Sneak Attack, which does 0.6 physical damage to the target, does significantly increased damage from the side or back, but is weak from the front. I didn't particularly care for this one, though I have seen the AI one-shot somebody with it before. I feel like this is one of those classes that's... it's fun to use early on, but you probably want to replace with something a little bit more reliable. Like, for example, with stuff like... what is it? Oh, actually, I missed Exploit Weakness, which increases critical hit damage by 50%. That's also very, very good. It's like, their passives are good for other classes. Their counter's not very good, and as far as their other kind of skills here, they're typically a lot scarier to run into than use yourself, if that makes sense. At least in my personal opinion. Though that being said, Exploit Weakness and Attack Expert are some stuff that I almost never take off certain characters, so just for them being a good fundamental class and for being able to pull some shenanigans with an auto crossbow, they'll get to go into B. I feel like that probably deserves slightly higher maybe, but for now, I'm going to leave them there. Alright, next up on the list, we have the Knight. Actually, I just noticed I forgot to cover the growths for the Scoundrel. Let's go over to, the kind of completion bonus for the Scoundrel. Growths-wise, they're primarily going for, for attack and a kind of mixed bag of attack, defense, mind, and resistance, just kind of balance across the board. And when you complete them, you get additional speed and evasion, plus a permanent crit bonus. So, potentially useful there. Okay, next up is the Knight. So these are basically going to be your kind of hardline tank here. Before pulling up the wiki, I'm gonna say... I'm gonna say that they're happily into S tier on account of a couple of skills that they have. I remember them being very useful for revives and such, and I remember them being very useful for getting around defenses, oddly enough. Now, let's go ahead and consult the wiki to see how wrong that is. So, growths-wise, they're going to be a step up in terms of their physical stats, going for more health, attack, and defense, as you'd expect, but they do start falling down in terms of speed. As far as their skills go, we've got Defend, which the character will take half damage from all attacks, and heal themselves for 0.4 times your mind. So this is a very, very solid tanking move. Effectively, think if you mix First Aid and Phalanx from Tactics Ogre, except you just can use it whenever the hell you want. You've got Protect, which will cover a allied unit, very useful for keeping anyone that you need to alive. Defensive Hit, this is one that I personally really appreciated. So deals 0.95 physical damage to a target, deals more damage the higher the caster's defense value is, counts as a regular attack, and will use their equipped weapons, element, and debuff. And so in this particular case, this means that you are able to essentially use your defense as your offense, so you can be a hard tank with an offense stat, basically just go the Shuckle route if you were, the Trick Room Shuckle route. From there you've got Taunt, which will inflict Berserk. This one is situational, but it can turn a lot of fights around. Like if there's an enemy unit that's causing you a bunch of trouble, you Berserk them, and suddenly you create a huge opening right then and there. So really like that one. Their counter is pretty meh, though. It grants Thorns to the character after being targeted. Now, Thorns is something like 5% damage reflection, which is very lackluster. Like, okay, the use case for Thorns here is that if you have a tank that is potentially running Defend all the time, you can effectively keep throwing out that defense as Thorns to everybody. Like, they keep getting hit, they keep reflecting back damage and whatever else, because the character's basically hitting themselves. In theory, it's potentially very useful, but it does so little that it very rarely matters. Like, the one time you'll see Thorns really do a lot are cases where there's a bunch of dogs on a particular map, they all grow Thorns, and then, like, you'll go and use something like a Sorcerer ability that hits the entire map, and then suddenly they get hit by Thorns, like, 8 times in a row. Then it can matter, but, aside from that, it's kind of just sort of there. It's another one of those skills that's just like, if you have nothing better to put in that slot, you know? Next for the passives, we've got No Flank and Life Font. So if you weren't tanking hard enough with Defend, you can also get rid of flank bonuses, and additionally will have HP regeneration. One thing I want to point out here for those that are unfamiliar with this game is you have 4 passives active for every character. So you have the 2 that are mandatory with your class. So for example, a Knight, once maxed out, will always have No Flank and Life Font active. And then they stack 2 more to their preference on top of that. So you combine this with like a Health Expert from the Mercenary, combine this with something like a MP Shield from the Alchemistic, and now you have a guy that just does not die. So very, very cool stuff there. You can just go permanent tank mode with a Knight. I personally find it really satisfying. Anyway. From there, we have Chivalrous Spirit, which will give you rebirth for that character. Just allows them to come back to life. It only costs 18 MP. You can use your kind of 1 starting Mana Stone at the start to give yourself rebirth whenever you'd like. And this actually causes them to combine exceptionally well with stuff like the... not the Paladin, what the hell are they called in this one? The Templar, I think? Yeah, Templar. Because they can essentially use Chivalrous Spirit, and then they can also use the Templar's kind of healing self-destruct ability to just constantly reset the field, as it were. Anyway, so really good good move, especially because it only takes 2 turns to charge that up. Then you've got Heavy Hit, which will always deal 1/3 of the target's current health. You know I love me some percentage-based damage, so I love that. And then One for All ends your turn. Every time an ally takes a single target offensive action on your target within your weapon's range, you will follow up with a regular attack on that target. Melee weapons attack at 1 times damage, and range attacks attack at 0.75 damage. And you'll actually see the AI running this a lot in New Game Plus, with things like One for All dual handguns with a bunch of buffs attached to their weapons. So it's like somebody goes and casts a basic debuff or something on somebody, and they're like, hold on, I gotta go and take multiple shots at this guy all of a sudden for free. So very situational, incredibly fun ability though. But you like go full tank mode, get yourself some kind of gimmick weapon, and then just park them right next to enemy units, and they just get free attacks on them. Think Flank from Tactics Ogre, except it's just anybody within range. They can just go get a free attack on, and this can be used with any weapon in the game. So yes, you can use this with friggin' like dual-wielding sniper handguns. Or even nail guns, just break legs while you're doing this. So yeah, S tier class, like, it's even better than I directly recall it being. And look, a lot of information with this game will be kind of a constant refresher, because there's just so much you can't keep it all in there at once, at least in my opinion. Anyway, so let's go ahead and move on to the next one then. So next we've got the Ranger. So the Ranger is, in my opinion, the crit specialist. I constantly run these. I personally view them as a kind of A-tier type of unit. Mostly for the same reason as these other ones here, that I like I like some of their abilities, but not all of them. Actually no, they do have to go into S, because now that they are the one with Sniper Shot, and that is probably the single hardest hitting thing in this game. Anyway, let's go ahead and consult the wiki to see how much is remembered correctly. So, you start off with the Rooting Shot. Has a 75% chance to inflict root, so basically your standard leg break, but it does a pretty solid amount of damage. Balm, which will get rid of Poison, Bleed, Blind, Root, Mute, Cripple, Sleep, and Weaken. That's particularly notable because not everything gets rid of Weaken. You've got Scout. I personally really like Scout. So it reveals all traps in a 6-tile radius and gives you crit up. Increases the unit's chances to score a critical hit. And this is, again, kind of one of the components that I really, really liked with the auto crossbow, because you got War Mage plus auto crossbow plus a crit build plus versatile, and that means you're basically quadruple critting potentially multiple times per turn. And yes, I checked, you unfortunately cannot dual wield auto crossbows, which is one of the few disappointing things about this game. But anyways, it saves yourself, it basically just gives you the ability to use a shield instead. Anyway, let's continue on. So, yeah, on top of that, traps are always a bummer to run into, so it allows you to actually scout them out as well. Alright. Next up, we've got Collect Pelt. This one's somewhat situational, but I like it. It's very reliable for what it does. So, does 0.8 physical to the target, yields a rare component if the character lands a killing blow on the monster. So basically, we're talking about improved version of Hunt from FFTA and A2. However, if the target is defeated by this ability, it cannot be raised for the rest of the encounter. On killing blow, Rebirth will be ignored. Boss enemies are immune for collection. So basically, this just permanently kills off that particular unit. They can't be re-raised, they can't be raised back, they can't be zombified, none of that. So it skips all crap, they are just permanently dead on the spot. And especially in New Game Plus, you want that. Alright, next up, No Weakness. Increases the target's chances of landing a critical hit by 25%. That one's pretty self-explanatory. Rain of Arrows. Does 0.9 physical damage in a line. I see the AI abuse this a lot. I'm personally not a big fan. Though, the funny part is, I see the AI completely whooping my ass with things like Rain of Arrows, or in the case of One Vision, Quill Rain, but like, it's funny. When you're actually playing yourself, it seems so rare that you actually find the opportunity to use a line attack like that, at least in my opinion anyway. Alright, next up is their next passive, Evasion Up, increases the unit's evasion value by 13%. That one is actually pretty massive, because your evasion rates are usually pretty low, so if you can get that high, that is a huge amount of immunity to a lot of different attacks. From there, we have multi-shot, deals 0.85 in an area. I personally prefer the auto crossbow, but you do you. Countershot counters a regular attack with any ranged offensive regular attack or skill taken against the character. It feels like this is very kind of picky about when it wants to trigger. Like, I know it mentions it exactly right here, I just don't feel like countershot comes up that often. And then you've got sniper shot, which is nutty. It takes 4 turns to charge up naturally, but does 3.8 times physical damage to the target, but will inflict root on the character. Bear in mind that you can make yourself immune to root to get rid of this, but well, in some cases. In some cases, it will actually bypass root immunity. In other cases, you can get rid of it. I forget the specifics off the top of my head right now, but please bear in mind that you can combine this with any other class. So, for example, if somebody were to, sniper shot, anything that does, a lot more damage than just a bow, that could be some pretty nutty numbers. On top of this, you see situations where you got stuff like the samurai later on down the road with their ability to just arbitrarily add, I think it's 3 tiles of range to every attack. So you basically have finisher combined, or no, Razor Wind combined with sniper shot. New Game Plus is filled with Rangers one-shotting people with that. so yeah, insanely good ability there, but you probably will use it once or twice per fight at most, because getting 36 MP together is pretty unlikely. And then upon mastery, they get 5 extra attack, 5 extra health, and 1 extra evasion. So they're pretty solid overall class. Yeah, definitely worth that S tier there. Okay. Let's see. Next, let's move on to the Templar. Now, I recall them, aside from one ability being a bit of a C tier kind of class, being fairly bulky, being fairly defensive. No, actually, they've got cleansing. Oh, that also, that gets to put. Okay, with cleansing there, with yeah, I feel like they might move up to A there. But let's see what I'm forgetting here. So the Templar's weird. They're like the more boring Knight. Growth-wise, they're pretty much exactly like the Knight, but even slower. We've got a few abilities on them. So they start off with a Holy Chant, does 0.75, which is scaling off attack and mind. Any small area around the character. Useful for awkward diagonal attacks. You probably won't use it that often, though. Resilience, any debuffs applied to the character will last 1 less turn. Situational, but nice to have. You probably won't go out of your way to use this as an additional thing, but it is nice to have, though I have seen the AI combine Resilience along with Sniper Shot to get rid of that root pretty much immediately. Soothing Chant restores 0.65 attack and mind HP to the character and all adjacent targets. That's usually not really enough to do much of anything. Defense Expert increases the character's base defense by 32 plus 1.5 times your level. That one is particularly good, though I feel like it kind of falls off over time. Again, by the time you get to New Game Plus, scaling is kind of wacky, but I feel like that one falls off a little bit. Plus, by the time somebody's running Defense Expert, by that point, you might as well just be dealing with them with debuffs or any kind of scaling type damage. It's funny that the regular Knight kind of hard counters this because of their whole dealing damage through 1/3 of, always hitting for 1/3 of health, or being able to berserk them to get rid of some of their other abilities and stuff like that. It is weird, kind of design-wise, how they're countered by their previous kind of demotion there. Anyway, so Cleansing Blade. This is probably one of their strongest things here. So deals 0.5 magical attack, scaling off of your regular attack damage to the target and dispels all buffs. Deals 0.35 increased damage for each buff dispelled. This is basically a boss killer. So that's really solid there. Evade attack causes a character to always evade any regular attack. Though I want to point out it's just regular attacks and does not apply to skills or spells or things like that. Siphon deals 0.75 attack and mind to the target and does 0.33 of that amount as MP damage that is absorbed. The MP is maxed at 25. I do appreciate that they actually use a plot item for this. But that being said, I find it useful for suppressing enemy units more so than actually getting MP back yourself. This one actually is pretty legit, especially for shutting down healers. Emboldening Chant grants attack up to the character and all adjacent targets. Pretty self-explanatory there. Rapturous Chant sacrifices the character to heal and remove all debuffs from all allies. The character will not suffer an injury from this. You know what? Actually, just for that, I think we'll go ahead and move them up to S. Because, yeah, that one is very, very useful in just, hell, beginning of the game, New Game Plus, everything. So, Rapturous Chant, like, this is why Knight plus Templar is just a really good combination. Because, like, Knight gets that Rebirth ability, they get this Chant ability, they just basically self-destruct, auto-revive, and then the entire party is healed, and all debuffs are removed. So you just have them sit in the corner of the map and do this over and over and over. Especially if you combine this together with a speed build that can build up MP a bit faster, or has something like MP font on there. Or Mana Font, I think it was called. They can just kind of get themselves some high movement, get some high movement shoes, repeatedly walk around the entire map, and every turn they can just go and reset this over and over and over. It's a really fun combination. I should probably point out, if you've never played this before, you can stack any accessories, for the most part, on top of each other. So if you, for example, wanted to throw items, and you wanted to throw them really far, there's nothing stopping you from just using all 5 equipment slots on just 5 different throwing gloves, and now you can just throw halfway across the map. So, it's kind of FYI. Alright, and then we have Righteous Blade, which is going to deal 2.8 times attack damage as a holy attack, which is fine, but kind of expensive, kind of boring. Plus 5 resistance, plus 5 defense, as well as a permanent 5% resistance to holy damage. I think that's holy... yeah, I'm pretty sure that's holy. When they master the class. So yeah, that probably deserves to be up in S. They're pretty good. I remember them being extremely boring, but looking over their list again, yeah, that's a solid combination of really good kind of long-term tools there. Alright, quick little sip here. Alright, so next up on the list is going to be the Peddler. Off the top of my head, I personally... personal S tier. Overall, I would expect it to be more of a B tier. Mostly because their traps are insanely good. Everything else is kind of okay. Their item abilities are situationally very useful. Their other abilities, I recall, being kind of just sort of there. But let's see what I'm forgetting. Alright, looking over their growths, this is a unit that specializes in health, speed, resistance, and defense, with everything else being slightly below. And alright, let's go over to their abilities. So, going down the list, we've got the Lacerating Trap. This is personally one of my favorites there. So, lays down a trap that inflicts bleed and immediately ends the turn of any enemy that steps on it. Actually, I should point out, this applies to all of the traps. So all of the traps, as long as... hell, just... even if they're immune to the trap, it will instantly end their turn. So if you know that there's somebody going somewhere, you can just automatically guarantee that just stuff is not happening for them, right? So anyways, you've got Inflict, which will do DOT damage. You've got the Immobilizing Trap, which will inflict Root and end their turn. This means that sometimes if you have a high movement unit with something like whatever it's called that gives them their immediate first turn, you can actually run out, drop essentially a trap right next to somebody, and then immediately run on back after dropping a second one, allowing you to disable 2 units before the fight even starts. So really solid there. Item potency. When using an item, it'll have double the normal potency, so this means that you can do things like taking a throwing rock, upgrading it, and having guaranteed 100 damage with that thing. Allows you to bypass defenses. This does fall off over time, but it is potentially very broken in the early game. Technically, this is later on down the list, but patented usage, which allows you to turn every item into a AoE effect. So this also means that, for example, they can combine that same item potency thing for being able to turn that throwing rock into a rocket launcher. They can just MacGyver that thing there. Okay, then we've got the Painful Trap. Actually, that's the one that I was talking about as being a favorite, which will always do half of the target's current health and immediately ends their turn. So, again, great for destroying any kind of high defense unit, and especially if there's, for example, a tank that they can ambush, and they set it up with, like, you hit them with a bleed trap, you hit them with a pain trap. There you go. That problem just sorted itself out. You don't have to worry about them anymore. From there, we have Quick Fingers, so situational commands such as opening, gathering, climbing, activating, or whatever else do not cost an action. This one is very situational, but it is honestly, in many ways, kind of reason enough to keep this as a primary class. So it basically just means that whenever you're using any kind of prop effect in the field, you can just do it for free. So whether you're picking up items, whether you're going up and down ladders, you can cheese the hell out of ladders using this. So yeah, you can put down, for example, put down a trap on, right next to a ladder, go up the ladder. Next turn, you can just put down a trap again, go down the ladder in the other direction. It just allows you to cheese the map more or less. From there we have the Alluring Trap, so character lays down a trap that will inflict charm and immediately end the turn of any enemy that steps on it. Instant mind control, but a lot of things do become immune to charm, so this is somewhat less reliable. Critical Quicken grants the character an immediate turn when HP is critical after taking damage. Again, very good reaction ability there, probably one of the better ones. Critical Expertise grants crit up to the target, increases their chance to score a critical hit. So this just allows them to give somebody else a crit up here. I believe this actually stacks with, with no weakness there, so that's pretty good there too. You can use that on somebody else. Sales Pitch grants haste in a small area. A unit with haste will get its turn faster. And then we already talked about patented usage. You know what? Actually, all in all, this deserves to be an A. Mostly because they're a absolute trickster through and through. A lot of their stuff is situational, but just their ability to completely shut down the stuff that they do shut down easily puts them in A. I see them probably losing a fight to everything else on the top here most of the time, but overall, every one of their abilities is situationally extremely strong, so we'll leave that there. Okay, next up we will have the Reaver. So, let's see how I remember this. Also, quick little check on time, because I think we'll actually have to do this as a multi-parter. Anyway, so, Reaver. So the Reaver, I remember being the kind of you do your hits more with the higher health or lower health or whatever else thing. Remember them being a very good combination alongside the Marked over here. So remember them being a potentially very good skill set to carry along somebody that's got already high-hitting moves there. Remember a lot of their skills being kind of dicey though, so like good passives, iffy other skills. But let's see how much of that is a illusion from my brain. All right, first on their list. Actually, no. Let's go over growths. So high health, high attack, lower defense, and way lower speed than previous ones. Going down their list of skills, we've got Primal Cry, which will deal damage in a small area and has a 50% chance to inflict defense down. Yeah, that's the one that I remember being kind of disappointing. In the AI's hands, they can sometimes do some pretty crazy stuff with it, but usually that's like if you're playing with a difficulty cranked up, they've got their stats crazy high, so something like defense down and an area attack is pretty good in their hands. Whirling Blow deals 0.95 physical damage in an area around the character, so just your standard spin move. It's okay. Again, scarier in the AI's hands than, I know, as far as I've seen your own. Into the Fray, damage, healing, dealt increased by 0.15 to 0.85 for every adjacent enemy. More adjacent enemies means a higher increase. And this is actually what makes it really, really good with stuff like the Marked there with their AoE abilities. Because if they just, for example, teleport into the middle of a crowd, they shred that thing. And this is what Whirling Blow is meant to be used with. So, situationally very strong. I think it's more useful on other classes that can take advantage of other bonuses. So, stuff like, let's say, a War Mage, or stuff like a, hell, even something like a Werewolf there might potentially get more benefit out of this. Just anybody that's able to do kind of some kind of sweep of some kind. The only problem is that the main way that they have to do it is a non-elemental, just quick spin kind of deal, you know? Alright, then we have Spread Pain, which deals 1x magical mind damage and transfers all of the character's debuffs to the target. Great for New Game Plus. Usually by the time you're using something like this, you've got way bigger problems, though. So kind of a meh in my book. Primal Blow deals 0.95 damage to the target from a distance. AI loves spamming this. It's just basically Sonic Boom, more or less. Or not Sonic Boom, Wave Fist, more or less. Bloodlust, damage dealt increases the lower the health the character's current HP is. Again, very useful for stuff like the Marked. Reckless Blow deals 1.5 times damage to the target, but also damages the character by a quarter of the damage dealt. Very good as an opener, and typically followed up with the next one, which is Desperate Blow. Deals as much damage as the character is missing HP. So combine this with high health off of something like the Knight or the Templar there. A great kind of subclass for them. I'm going to put them over here in B for now, and then you got Critical Rebirth. When they're knocked to critical, they get Rebirth. Now, on paper, that seems way stronger than some of the stuff that we talked about, but what I want to point out is that each individual piece of the Reaver is more useful on another class rather than themselves. So I guess we're kind of rating them based off of how good the class is by itself, not as a subclass of something else to an extent. Like, stuff like Bloodlust on anybody that's got more directed AoEs is really strong. Same thing for Into the Fray if they've got a bunch of sweeping moves or whatnot. But they don't really have much to take advantage of a lot of weakness bonuses or anything like that. Stuff like Reckless Blow is very good and directly strong, but again, it's very neutral. It's a very neutral type of attack. Same thing for Desperate Blow. Potentially very, very strong move, if it's on another class that's got some high health options, you know, like even going for like a Mercenary with extremely high health combined with Desperate Blow, that could one-shot a lot of things. For the Reaver themselves, less so, you know? They could just put those passives in there, sure, but again, they're better as a subclass than a direct class, in my opinion. Anyway, let's go ahead and move on then. Next up, we've got the Gunner. So the Gunner over here, off the top of my head, I feel like putting them down into probably a C or a D, personally. Here's the thing. They've got a great weapon, a great type of primary weapon. Some of their skills are interesting, but I recall them kind of letting me down the vast majority of the time. But let's go ahead and see what the wiki has to say. Okay, so they've got decent health growths, mixed... Oh, jeez, sorry, that was a weird noise. Kind of a mixed attack and defense growths, and kind of average on everything else. Now, here's the thing. They want to use their focus skill as their main thing. So, focus, character is granted 2 times focus on the character's next turn. Any action taken other than items uses focus up and deals double damage or double healing. Focus wears off even if not used. So, essentially, you are setting yourself up to attack the next round. That's what they're meant to be doing in between turns. So already their main damage gimmick requires them to set this up. I want to point out that they're not the only ones that can use focus. Other classes can get it through more convenient means. They have to spend their turn as well as some MP in order to set this up. So it is a very solid ability, but they basically are attacking every other round, or their attacks are going to be kind of dinky, you know? But if you can kind of call the shot, as it were, with focus, it's potentially very strong. Then going down their list, it's kind of what you'd expect from the Gunner from FFTA or A2. So we've got the Slowing Bullet, which is a attack with a 50% chance of slow. You've got Concentration, which increases the character's accuracy by 20% when taking any offensive action. It's alright, I guess. It's just a passive. We've got Crippling Bullet, which is a 75% chance of inflicting cripple, which prevents you from using skills. You've got Silencing Bullet with a 75% chance of inflicting mute. I personally found all of these, except for the Slowing Bullet, to be pretty unreliable at actually stopping something. Height advantage increases damage done by 0.05 for each height value the target has over the target, or the user has over the target. I found this really handy with stuff like the Sorcerer, not so much for these guys, though, because you basically have to have teleport in order to take advantage of that, or some jet boots or something. Enraging Bullet deals 0.75 to the target and has a 50% chance of inflicting Berserk. This, again, feels surprisingly unreliable, and I'm not sure why. It just seems to miss much more than 50% of the time, at least that's what it feels like. Anyway. Opportunistic Bullet does 0.8 damage to the target. Damage increases by 0.5 for each debuff the target is inflicted with. Potentially very good if you're running something like like a Plague Doctor in your team where you're going and throwing out a lot of debuffs. I feel like that's probably the scariest thing on their list, because if you stack up enough stuff, that's potentially a very, very solid move, especially if you combine in with something like Focus. You have your debuffers set up ahead of time. Maybe you have some characters with debuffs on their weapons, and then you combine this in with Opportunistic Bullet, and all of a sudden they're doing, like, 6 times their normal damage. That's really good, but takes some time to set up, Magic Bullet deals 1 times magical attack damage to the target, counts as a regular attack. I'll be honest, this one has let me down for years. I constantly try to use it, thinking it's going to be that moment when it'll do something, and then it doesn't. And then you've got a weird oddball of a thing here with Teleport Other. Counter any offensive action taken on the character by teleporting that character to some random location on the map. This is potentially useful for getting your own units around the map using some low damage ability. Kind of weird for a defensive skill. It's either really good or really bad, because it can potentially just take a heavy hitter and put them right next to your weakest units. It also might take one of their units and just put them completely out of commission. And then you've got attack and defense, as well as some resistance for the mastery bonus. I don't know. I'm not really a big fan of the gunner. Their weapon choice is really good. A couple of their skills on paper should be amazing, but I just feel like they let me down every time. I constantly use gunners on the team. I just really don't like the class, as much as that doesn't make sense. But I'd be curious to hear what folks think about that. Anyways, that will be it for part 1 for now. Yes, we have quite a few more to go. We're like a quarter of the way through the list, but there is so much to cover on every one of these classes. Anyways, I gotta get going. I will see you in part 2.